Everybody, my guest on the show is Leslie Danford. She is the founder of Vitaminis. Leslie, so great to have you here. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. Leslie, I always like to find out, and one of the cool things about being a podcaster is I get to talk to people from around the globe. And I think people have heard that you're probably not from around the globe. You're like American or maybe Canadian, but Leslie, just like to start off, like where you're joining us from today.
I'm in the Chicago suburbs. It's a nice sunny
Chicago
day here in
suburbs.
Chicago.
Yes, it's beautiful. We were just catching up. We're recording this April 9th, which is the day after the eclipse, and it sounds like you got a spectacular view out where we are here in New York. We got a bunch of clouds it was kind of strange. It was weird. It got dark, but it wasn't like interesting.
Yeah, we did have to drive a couple hours for the spectacularness, but yeah, it's pretty cool.
But you made it. Excellent. So we're going to talk about a variety of things today. We're going to talk about what you're doing now. We're also going to talk about what's led you to today. I think is for some people just as interesting or sometimes more interesting. And you've done a lot of things. So let's just kick off, and love to have you share with the audience anything that you think would be useful for us to know about your journey as we kick off today.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting how life kind of brings together your passions and kind of sends you on a path and you don't always know where it's going to end up. But I've always been passionate about nutrition. I think it actually started when I was a kid. My dad, who's a scientist, was kind of in charge of the meals. My mom traveled for work, which I think was kind of unusual in the 80s. And my dad was not a foodie at all. So dinner was always like, here's your protein, here's your vegetable, or it was like, components like that. So that's how I think about food. It's like making sure you get all the components for your machine that is your body. And I've always kind of thought about it that way. And I'm always into that because I believe if you take care of yourself in that way, you can prevent illness and really have more energy and kind of improve your life overall. It's kind of like the fuel you put in your car, right? So that was always my passion personally. But at the same time, it's really hard to get that done with Whole Foods. It's just hard. It's like hard to get it all in. And then I also learned over time that processed foods make it hard for your gut to even absorb vitamins. A lot of our produce doesn't even have that much vitamin content anymore because of industrialized farming and things like that. So then I started looking into supplements in my personal life, but there's a lot of issues with them. So when I was pregnant, I took pregnancy vitamins, but they make me sick. Like they make you nauseous. They're just really intense. And then I tried gummies, but they're full of sugar. You feel like you're coating your teeth with sugar every day. And so this was always kind of like a thing I dealt with in my background life. And then professionally, I worked in consumer products, and then I worked in beverages in the alcohol industry. So while I was working in the alcohol industry, we were seeing all this research come through about clean label, functional beverage, nutrient dense foods. And I thought, yes, like this, I need this. Because I personally was like, this is what we need. I need that personally. But I was like, we're never going to do anything with this information because we're in the alcohol industry. So this was kind of going on for a few years. And then I ended up leaving that industry and going to the hospitality industry right before the pandemic. And bad timing. So I got laid off. Timing. And that's when it all kind of came together. I got laid off and I was home with my kids. Schools were shut down and everything, trying to get everyone's nutritional needs met, thinking about vitamins and how to make sure our immune systems were ready in COVID. Still didn't like gummies. Still didn't like pills. And it just kind of like all came together at that point.
I have so many questions. So many questions. I'm laughing because I didn't, as a consumer of alcohol, I would never think that alcohol companies would be paying that much attention to like food trends.
Well, it just comes through like any research that you get. It might be like flavors. I mean, if you think about trends overall right now in the population, most of them are health and wellness oriented. So if you're working in the alcohol industry, and by the way, people are drinking a lot less. I mean, there was a COVID spike, but Generation Z does not drink alcohol the way our parents did or their parents did.
Absolutely.
So if you're in the alcohol industry, it's like you see that coming, and then you know this health and wellness stuff is coming, and it's like a little bit of a catch-22.
Yeah, I was just, not to get too much into this, but I think it does relate. Two things. One, things are legal now that were not legal 20 years ago in a variety of states. I think Illinois, marijuana, THC is legal.
Texas too.
Certainly legal here in New York State as well. And you can walk down the streets of New York and smell it everywhere. That was not a thing 20 years ago, or wasn't legal at least. Two, I just saw an article that one of the trends, and maybe it was Gen Z, is actually non-alcoholic beverages.
Oh, yes.
And that's crazy to me.
Oh, it's a big
Because
trend.
to
Part of it is because people are
amazing.
using cannabis and then they want like the drink with it, but not double down. And then part of it is the
Oh.
health trends. So it's both. It's not all health. It's not all good
No,
necessarily.
no, yeah, no. This is not purely, but laughing is I'm 46, so for me, the idea of like going out to a bar as somebody who drink would like to drink alcohol and like drink sometimes is like I'm not ordering a non-alcoholic beverage. That's just like not a thing that I would probably do. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
either
it's
gonna
funny.
drink water. Yeah,
I was
yeah,
skiing in January and I went to après ski and a whole table of guys ordered athletic brewing, that non-alcoholic
yeah,
beer. And I was
yeah.
like, interesting, very
My
interesting.
gosh. Well,
Anyway,
Leslie, so thanks for sharing that first part of your journey. I want to talk a little bit. You had a very unique situation with your family and starting a business. And then you also mentioned in COVID, and for those of us who had young kids at home during COVID, I think Chelsea Handler, the comedian, was saying we all need extra therapy. There's no doubt in my family that was tough,
yeah,
real tough. Having a 4-year-old on a tablet on Zoom is not a winning combination
doesn't
when you're
work
both trying
really.
to work. It doesn't really work, especially when you have two working parents, which is what we have in our house. But I'm really curious. You actually started this business when you were, like you were expecting,
Yeah, sorry, my
and
cat
and
thing.
yeah, no, yes, please, all welcome. And as we were talking about, you actually ran this business with a newborn, like an
Yes.
infant. So let's talk a little bit about that, and then we're gonna get into like some of the business things and the health and wellness. But like, I saw that, my mind is blown. How? Because I
Well,
a dad of two,
yeah.
watch my wife. Yeah,
I get that reaction a lot, but it's interesting. So I have 4 kids. My first three, I was working in corporate jobs, structured.
right.
They were in daycare, and it was very structured. And
Yeah,
then with my fourth, I did find out I was pregnant right when I was just about to launch the company. And so a couple impacts. One is I gave myself like a 9-month timeline, basically, where I was like, I got to get this product out the door so that I at least have a little bit of breathing room in the newborn phase where it's like, at least it's out. So I found that helpful because it was like a deadline I imposed upon myself. But pros and cons, I mean, when I think about that time running a business in the newborn, it was not stressful. I think the reaction people have is like, oh my gosh, that's so stressful. How did you do it? So difficult. I don't remember it feeling that way. And I think it's because when you own your own business, you're calling the shots. It's like,
mm-hmm.
you want to do the work, do the work. If you want to do the work at 10 p.m., do the work at 10 p.m. If you want to do the work while you're breastfeeding, do the work while you're breastfeeding. It's like you
Yeah,
can control it. So it didn't feel like in corporate where maybe you're only working 9 to 5, but you're really stressed because you want to go to your kid's soccer game and you have a meeting that goes until 5 and can't get out of it.
right.
You're like a victim almost of it. Whereas in the vitamin sense, I didn't really take any time off, but it felt better
Yeah,
to me. And I don't know if that's a personal
yeah,
thing or if that would be true for everyone, but
yeah.
um,
Also, Leslie, not that you asked for the marketing advice, but the answer should just be, it was really simple. I just took my Vitaminis and my energy
yeah,
was so
right.
good. It's like some of these podcasts up and you're like, and I had more energy than I've ever had in my life. And I could have done this twice.
You know what's funny though? I really do think like, people talk about self-care and it's like, what is that? Is like a manicure? I think basic self-care is taking care of your nutrition because you do feel better
Yeah.
and sleeping
Yeah.
and drinking water. It's like not that hard, but it does make it easier. It
And
really does.
yeah. And as somebody who also pivoted from a corporate career to running my own thing, the brain required to run your own business, arguably, I think is more for me, is the capacity to be sharp in the mind,
Yeah.
because the decisions are all on you versus, like you said, you work in
Totally.
corporate. You've got one thing you need to be really good at, but then you've got departments that do all these other things. And now it's like, like you said, you're the marketer, you're the social media manager, you're the nutrition person, you're also the person who has to clean up the customer service things. And that takes a lot of brain space because you're context switching. And most corporate
Yeah.
jobs, you're not context switching all day. You're like,
Totally. And I'd add two more things to it. The other
yeah,
thing I would add is it's like an accountability thing. Like in corporate, doesn't matter how driven you are, there's a part of you that's like, well, I did my part. I did my part.
totally.
It's not your,
Paycheck's coming.
yeah. And like, if it doesn't work out, it's not like all you, but like in your own business, it is all you. So that's one thing that's draining. That's almost like an emotional drain. And the other thing that I think is challenging that I didn't really appreciate is in corporate, there's a lot, we talk about it as like shade. I remember talking about it as like, there's a lot of shade. You make a
Oh,
mistake, you have
absolutely.
weaknesses, whatever, there's a lot of shade to get away with, if you will, that. But in your own business, you live with the consequences of every single decision. So it's like, let's say you
Yeah.
procrastinate a lot, or you're impulsive, or you have a temper and you snap at a vendor or something. Like, it's all right there, which I personally, I'm thankful for that. Cause like, how often do you get to really grow like that? But it's hard to face all of that and grow personally while you're doing all the work. It's challenging.
Yeah, it is. Before we kind of move into what you're up to now, I'd love to spend a couple minutes on the partnership required with your family to make this all work too. Because
Yeah.
this isn't just you running a business. This is a family decision. You've got children. I don't know if you have a partner or not, but like this is a family thing. This is not just you
Yes.
going, "Hey, mom's going to go do this." So how I'd love to talk about kind of your thought process with that if you're with a partner, how that went, and then how you're able to get everybody on the same page with that because that's a big shift. And I say
Yes.
this as somebody who also made this shift and my wife works in corporate. I worked in corporate when we met and then I did my own thing and she still works in corporate. So it's a
Yeah,
team
it's
decision.
true. It is a big
Yeah.
thing. I think there's like multiple levels to it, but I am married and my husband and I actually met in college at the Chicago Entrepreneurial Group. So we were both
Okay.
interested in being entrepreneurs. We met in this club. He went on and did the entrepreneurial thing pretty much right away, and I did the corporate thing.
Sure.
And then in these circumstances, we had an explicit conversation where I was like, hey, I think this could be a chance for me to actually explore this entrepreneurial thing I've always wanted to do. And he was like, okay, yeah. So we kind of like had that discussion. It's almost like turn taking or something like that.
Yeah.
So that was part of it. I'd say the other thing too is we bootstrap. So there's a financial investment part of it too. And the way we
Mhm.
manage that side of things is just breaking off little chunks. It's like, okay, we're
Sure.
going to put a little bit in, see if it works. And if it does work, we'll put a little bit more. So it wasn't like an enormous bet all at once. It was
Sure.
like you can just quit at any time, and you just kind of take
That's
the
good.
baby
Yeah.
steps, test. And then the third thing is I think one mistake people make when they're doing their own thing is they think they can like kind of do it on the side or like do it in their free time, but you can't. You know this. So like that was the other thing is like, having 3 kids and now 4, I cannot watch 4 kids and run a business. So like keeping all that infrastructure in place, I mean after COVID obviously when everything was gone, but
Sure.
having childcare, continuing to outsource the things that we outsourced when I was in corporate because I can't take on all that extra stuff and do this. So I think that's something people don't necessarily think of, but you have to take it seriously. Like if you're going to do it, you have to treat it like it's a real job. Otherwise, it will never become more than a hobby.
That's I don't know if do you watch Shark Tank at all?
A little bit.
That's one of the filters for most of the sharks on there is they'll say, "Hey, are you doing this full time?" And somebody's like, "Well, I'm also my did." They go, "I'm not interested in investing because they like you said, they know that you can, like you're taking investor money and then you can it's not for me, and then the investor's left holding the bag with a out of business
Yeah.
versus like we've actually bet our family has bet something on this thing,
Yeah.
and that's important. Yeah,
Right. No, totally. And even if you don't quit, it just can never be as big as it could have been if you had dedicated. And it's funny, I actually went back to work for a short period of time during Vitaminis, and I thought at the time that I could kind of keep going and looking back on it, yeah, it was going, but when I went back full time on it, I achieved so much more. Obviously. I mean,
yeah,
yeah. But like
but yeah.
yeah, it's
And
yeah, it's different.
also the idea that when you have a corporate job, like, I don't know if you had to like go into a conference room and hide you're doing work on Vitaminis when you're doing your job, or your boss is like, "Hey, can we talk?" And you had like something to do with Vitaminis. It just be my experience with that is it just becomes stressful and it's not
Yeah.
good for you mentally because
Yeah.
I mean, and so you're
Divide.
serving two masters. Yeah, you're serving,
Right.
you and you also know, and like highly likely, Leslie, you were way more passionate about your business than you were about your corporate job because it
Right.
was your thing.
Naturally, right? Yeah.
Yeah, naturally. Very cool. So let's talk about funding. So you said you and your husband were bootstrapped it. Have you end up raising any capital for the business?
Yes. So we basically had an amount that we felt comfortable putting into it. And
Sure.
then, especially now that Vitaminis is into retail, that's a whole nother level of funding because you're funding a lot of inventory. A lot of these retailers require a big upfront investment just to get in the door. And then you have
Sure.
to support them with marketing. So it's different when it's like a little kind of website business growing ground up versus retail is bigger. So I have now raised angel round. I'm in the process actually right now. And it started with friends and family, because those are the people that know you the best and take those bigger risks. But now bringing on more angels that I don't know, but I've just pitched them. They get it. They see the potential. So it does shift things quite a bit mentally. It's like, oh, now people that I don't even know are putting their backing behind it. It's exciting because it means I've built something that people believe in besides just me and my friends. But it's also puts a little bit of pressure on, and it just changes the feel a little bit.
Yeah, it changes the feel. It's not totally your business anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Got a bunch of people like, hey, quarterly, we want to know how this is going.
Yes, I try to get ahead of that by doing those updates proactively. But yeah, it's different. I
Yeah.
think it's good though, because it forces you to be
Yeah,
a little bit more buttoned up.
totally. But yeah, and the idea that, and you said this without the accountability and when it's on your business, you can like, I don't know. I know last quarter wasn't that good. I'm not going to look at the numbers today. But like, people are going to want to know the numbers when
Yeah,
they've put money in.
yeah.
So going into that now, what you mentioned retail. How did you know it was time to go into retail?
It's a
Because I know
really
that
good question.
because that's a and I'm just from working with a lot of entrepreneurs and watching Shark Tank a lot. This is a question they get a lot on Shark Tank too, because it is a beast, right? Like the big purchase orders, the scale,
Mm-hmm.
these especially, and I don't know where you're distributing right now, but depending on the retailer, they have they have these extremely strict requirements around a variety of ways that they'll even write you a check for $1 because they needed
Yeah.
to know that it fits into their 3PL and their logistics system as well.
Totally. No, it's a really good question. And I wish I could say I had it all mapped out from the beginning. But the reality is, when I launched in around the pandemic time, there was no choice but to go into e-commerce. Like, that's just where you had to go.
Sure.
But because everyone was doing that, the price of doing paid acquisition online, so social media marketing, search marketing, was so expensive. The number that sticks in my head when I looked into it was $6 a click. So
Oh,
so it did, and that's not even a purchase. That's just a click. So it was just
that's
off the table.
brutal.
It made no
Yeah,
sense.
that makes
So
no.
so I was doing grassroots, like sampling, word of mouth, slowly building without paying for any customers. And it was just really, really slow. So I remember, I think it was like around the 1 year mark, I added up, all the sales. Maybe it was 18 months, and I could count on my fingers how many thousands. It was so small. And I thought, I either have to dump a bunch of money into advertising, or I need to go into retail. It was like I have to do something to take it to the next level. But the other thought that was happening is, when I started the business, I didn't know, I don't think anyone knew, if people were even going to go back to shopping in person. But by the
Right.
time this 18 months point came, it was very clear that when it comes to food and beverages, especially, people want to go to the grocery store. They like going to the grocery store. They want to
Totally.
taste it. They want to look at it. They want to touch it. And online, you're buying a 12 pack of Vitaminis. In the store, you're buying one. So it's like it's an easier entry point to try it. And so I knew that was the way to go, as opposed to just dumping a bunch of money into e-commerce. I thought, okay, the pandemic is like a couple of years behind us. Now people are going back to the store. You have to be omni-channel. So we ended up launching these singles in store, and they have a QR
Mm-hmm.
code on them.
Okay.
So if
Yeah.
you like it, you spend $5 on this, you like it, you scan the code, you drop your email on our website. We can funnel you to a 12 pack, which is $49.99,
Sure.
and a subscription. So it's kind of like
Sure.
this nice ecosystem.
That's very cool, Leslie.
Good.
I always love to ask anybody that interview who's an entrepreneur a variety of questions. So if you've listened to any episodes, you might know these, but I want to first ask you why, and I think you've answered a lot of this because it matters to you and your family, is what I heard in your answer.
Yeah.
But why Vitaminis? Like, what is it that's so inspiring for you about it?
I mean, the nutrition, I really do believe that like good nutrition solves a lot of problems, but it's really hard to do it on your own, like with food and even with the supplements out there. So
Yeah.
I just felt like the world needed an easy, tasty, fun thing to just integrate into your diet to make you feel like, okay, I'm getting a little bit extra. I'm checking some of these boxes. I don't have to stress. I didn't have to suffer. It's not another chore. It's like a fun, tasty, clean way. And I didn't see anything like that out there. It was either like pills, vitamin pills, or
Yep.
buy a juicer and juice all your stuff from scratch. There was no kind of like clean middle ground. And it was what I needed. So it was like one of those true
Nice.
stories
Yeah.
that was like serving my needs. And maybe there's some other people out there that need that too.
Yeah. I was you saw me laugh about the juicer. I'm like, anybody who has a family is like, we're not juicing. That
There's
is
no time for
like
that.
there's time,
I
but
didn't
also
clean that thing.
the amount of storage and then the mess that it makes. Like, it's just
Yeah,
not
no.
a thing. So I think you answered my second question is what problem does this solve? Because every product does. So like, let's expand upon that a little bit. What are some of you know the changing trends and demands, but also what problems this solve? Because this is a crowded space. Just going to say it. There's a
Yeah.
ton of things. There's whole stores called GNC that sell, and some of them are not going to be competition. All there'll be like protein powders, but you can walk in and there's a variety of products on the stage. So
Mhm.
what's the problem that Vitamin E uniquely solves?
So I think overall, consumers are getting more educated about nutrition and health and wellness, and more people know. And it's funny because I live in this, but I forget sometimes that the average American maybe doesn't even think about vitamins, doesn't even think about it. But over time, we're moving that way. So people are understanding they need to take care of their body, they need to eat better, they need to be clean and take vitamins and that kind of thing. But at the same time, the existing options are difficult. Like not everybody is gonna get the juicer and do all the whole foods. Supplements are tough. Like pills are hard to swallow. It's a chore. You forget to do it. They make you
Yep.
sick. I heard they sometimes will even stick to your stomach lining, and when they do colonoscopies, they're like finding pills stuck in people's
Ugh. Like
intestines.
the binding. Yeah, that's gross.
Yeah, they're just not natural. And they have all these ingredients that help with the manufacturing process that people don't want to eat. People are reading labels now more.
Sure.
Gummies, tons of sugar. Sugar's like the new enemy, right? Public enemy 101 now. So that's the problem with gummies. They are maybe tasty and easy, but you're eating candy every single day. And then in terms of like shots, there's a lot of other shots out there if you're looking for that like quick juice shot, but they are often very, very strong flavors like ginger,
Yeah.
turmeric, pepper, and they require refrigeration. So you have to either
Yeah.
drink them right away or quickly. And by the way, that annoys the retailers as much as it annoys the people because like these shots, they got to move them out so quickly. So vitamin E solves a lot of those problems. It's easy, tasty. It's basically orange pineapple juice. This one's a berry banana, so it's fruit.
Hmm.
No refrigeration required. No mystery
Amazing.
ingredients. Easily digested. Some of the digestion and the nutrient absorption can happen in your mouth, like right when you start. It's going
Oh, that's
in.
cool. Yeah.
So it just checks a lot of those problems off the list.
The Talking to Cool People podcast is brought to you by Jason Frizzell Coaching. Jason works with amazing people who are looking to find and develop their passion and purpose and create their journey to wherever it is they want to go. Check us out at jasonfrizzell.com, Facebook, or on Instagram. Jason loves hearing from anyone who thinks it would be cool to connect, to be coached, or to be a guest on our show. Email him at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com or DM him on Facebook and Instagram. And now, back to some more amazing conversation on Talking to Cool People.
So I'm going to ask you this, and we're just getting to know each other. But I heard you have a hospitality. You did some hospitality work, and I think you said consumer packaged goods. I
Yeah.
haven't heard you say anything about being a food scientist.
No, I'm not. And actually, that is where I've had to outsource a bit.
Sure.
So
Well, that's what I was
had
going to
the
ask you about.
vision for this. Yeah, I
Yeah,
have like
cool.
the vision. And then, but you're right. I mean, there's a lot of technicalities about like when you say food science, like there's like a chemistry, stability, like shelf stable process point of view. But there's also like the regulatory side of things of
Exactly,
like
yeah.
ingredients and label claims. And those two areas I've had to outsource. But it's funny, the food scientists, I've worked with a couple now, and it's funny how you realize why a lot of products on the market are the way they are. I said, okay, we want no added sugar. We want no mystery ingredients, like laying out what I need. We need these vitamins. And what came back had added sugar or sweeteners in it or colors. And I look at it, I'm like, oh, this is great. What? Wait a second. I thought we said we weren't going to do that. And it's like, oh, you have to. You have to add sugar or people won't buy it, or you have to
Yeah.
add color.
Yeah.
And it really is like the vision's important because you have to kind of push against all of the structural blocks to do something different.
Yeah. Well, it was a little bit of a leading question. The reason I'm asking is I'm sure people are listening probably have great ideas for food products. And I wanted to highlight you as somebody, you don't need to be a food scientist. You just need to know what you want and then you outsource it. And full disclosure, my mother-in-law is a food scientist. She worked at Kellogg's. So she did cereal and she did a lot of she was the person that the marketers go, we want to say this about our stuff. And she'd go, you can't say that. You can say that. worked with the FDA, and then she wrapped up her career in Chicago at DMI, which is a dairy.
Oh, yeah.
Dairy Management Institute. They do all the got milk stuff. They represent the dairy farmers of America and did a lot of food science. And she is a food scientist, but she's not a visionary.
Mm-hmm.
So, because I think like when I hear about food products, a lot of times I think about, and this is my own assumption about it, it's my own bias, I guess, is like, oh, this person like knows a lot about food, but you just know what you want for you and for your family. You know enough about taste and like what vitamins you want, but you don't need to know all these things.
I think
Like,
that's
you
a
don't need,
great point. I'm glad you brought that up
Yeah.
because
yeah,
there are 1,000 things you could tell yourself that would tell you can't do it.
right.
I
I'm
can
not a
still
food
come
scientist.
up
I don't know how to do it. Yeah.
You know, I have kids. I don't have time. I don't understand this. I don't understand that. I don't know what to do. I'm too busy. Yeah, that's normal, I think, for people to kind of face all of that. But you don't need any of that stuff. And even me, I mean,
Yeah.
I worked in the alcohol industry, which is a completely different industry. People think, oh, you must have known what to do because you worked in the alcohol industry. No, it's completely different.
No.
And I was in corporate in a like little role. I wasn't doing everything, and I wasn't in juices or supplements or anything. I didn't deal with the FDA at all. So yeah, I think it's great that you point that out because if you really are passionate, you want to get something done, you're just going to figure it out. You're going to figure it out.
Yeah, and there's people that can help you along the way. Also, I had a smile about the alcohol because alcohol is shelf stable by definition, isn't it? Because it's
Yeah,
like alcohol
its own
keeps
germ.
it clean. Yeah, keeps it clean. So let's talk about challenges you've had. Again, my own assumption, I am not a food person in terms of like I don't have a passion for creating food product. To me, it seems hard to manufacture at a way that's cost effective. Like that's my outward thing. And again, I just keep going back to Shark Tank for this one because they get a lot of food products on there. And a lot of the time, the big thing they need money for is to reduce the cost of manufacturing to get it to a place where people will go, oh, that's competitive enough that I'll buy that and maybe like like I can buy kombucha. Kombucha's juice is probably in some ways a competition to your product because it's it's in the refrigeration, but it's like
Probiotic.
Probiotics. And the idea that we need to get it to a cost where you can then mass market it as opposed to like certain people don't care. They're like, that's the product for me and my family. We have lots of disposable income. But we also know here in the United States, I think worldwide, and greedflation and inflation in the food market is a little out of control. So, what are some things that you've learned having to go out and get this, both put together and created like the recipe, but then you've had to have it go manufactured? What are some things you've learned about that process?
Yes, it's a really great question because that is where a lot of the hard work happens. It's not like you just have an idea and it just I think when I look back, and a lot of this is like me reflecting in hindsight, but you really have to take a long view because when you're first starting out, co-packers owe you nothing. They're not going to sign contracts.
Yeah.
They're not going to give you the best pricing. They're not going to prioritize you. You're literally just a stranger, you know? And so a lot of the early stages, you are pitching yourself and your product to them. You are like trying to win a spot. It's not like, oh, I have this great product. Who wants to get it? You're lucky you. No. So that's one thing I think. It's just like a mindset shift that these people are running their businesses. They have these giant production lines. And for them to stop production and move it over to manufacture whatever random thing you came up with that's unproven is a big ask. So that's part of it. And then the same thing goes with pricing. My first productions of both products were not profitable. I think they were about break even. So that's okay though, because I convinced my co-packer to do a small run because I knew I didn't want to make 30,000 bottles. I just wanted to make 5,000. And they were like, listen, this is only worth our time if we charge you a higher price.
Sure.
But it was worth it to me because it's basically an investment to figure out, get it in the market, see if people like it, whatever. So that is the other thing with taking the long view is you're not going to have the best margins on day one. You might not even make a dime on day one. And this is, I don't know if like this is true for everyone because I know some other business types, people are able to get great margins right away. But at least for shots and like beverage production, it's difficult. Like that margin comes with scale.
Yeah. And as a there to me, there's like a psychological barrier of pricing over a certain amount when you're buying like a shot of something or some sort of health drink where, and like to me, there's just a psychological barrier, even if you can afford it, that like there's a price point you kind of need to hit to have like me and my wife walk in and go, oh, I'd like to get some of those for our family. And this makes sense for our family.
Yeah, it's exactly right. Like you can't charge what you want to get or what you think you should get. You have to charge what people are going to pay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's all about the value. Leslie, what about, let's ask the big question. What do your kids think of it?
Oh yeah, they love it. They're very involved.
That's so cool.
I have 4 kids. One of my 4 is very, very picky, and sometimes he'll drink Vitaminis and sometimes he won't. So full confession, not all of them love it, but the other ones do. They like to hear about the business side of things. They like to see it in the market. They love when their friends bring it to school, their lunches. And my 2-year-old loves them. She'll get like a little straw and just like sip them right out of the bottle.
That's so cool.
So yeah, it's fun. It's nice to work on something that I can like talk to the kids about, which I didn't really do that in my prior career. So it's cool.
Yeah. You weren't talking to your kids about alcohol business?
Yeah, right. Or if you are, you're always like,
you're like, yeah, mommy helps do these things that adults drink.
Yeah, you're like, tequila is really great. Wait, no, it isn't. I don't know.
No. Not. It's great when you turn 21. Until then, not at all. Are your kids involved in the business at all? Like, do they come in and like, do you teach them anything about what you're doing?
Not a ton, but I will have them do photo shoots, or we do sampling sometimes at like their sporting events or things like that.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Nice.
But I try to keep it somewhat separate.
Yeah. And does your husband get involved in the business at all?
A little bit. I joke with him that he's like my biggest investor, my biggest like, board member or whatever. But I think we both like mutually, you got to kind of have like a separation of church and state a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
So on occasion, I'll ask him for advice on something. I definitely have him taste like samples and things like that. Or, maybe he has an introduction to somebody in the entrepreneur world that might be helpful. But for the most part, I try to keep it like a little bit separate. So it doesn't overtake my life either, by the way.
Yes, my wife and I have a very similar thing. Too much involvement has not been great for our marriage either. So you're like, yeah, a little bit, but also separation.
Totally.
What are some of the things that were surprising to you as you have gone through your entrepreneurial journey that nobody, because I know you're well educated, you've had a great corporate career, but there's just some things you don't get taught, period. Like you just like, it's only the school of hard knocks. What are some things that you've learned since starting this business that like nobody could have taught you? And I was and To say this too, Leslie, I laugh about this because you and I could go walk into a Barnes and Noble and see shelves upon shelves of how to like start a business, run a good business, all these strategies. You can get your MBA. I know you have your MBA, all these things, but there are things that you have learned that you can never read about, period.
Yeah.
Isn't it crazy? Yeah.
Yeah. I know. That's why I got to write the book.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that you've learned that you're like, wow, I didn't really know that this is going to be a thing as I went out and had this journey?
Yes. So on that note, just in general, like some things you literally cannot learn until you go through it. So it doesn't matter. Even if it wasn't a book, you could read it and be like, oh yeah, I get that. And then
that's cool.
And you're like, oh, so there's that. I think one thing is I thought starting a business was just about hard work. People are like, oh, starting a business is so hard. I'm like, oh, I can work hard. I've worked hard all my life. I can work harder than the best of them. That is not the hard part. I mean, it is hard work, but the hard part is kind of managing the uncertainty and the mentalness of it. Because I realize a lot of what we do in life is to cut down on uncertainty. Maybe I'm speaking for myself. A lot of what I try to do, I plan, I organize, I try to stay on top of things because I like to know what's going to happen. Like uncertainty is scary. There is absolutely no way to get away from that in your own business. There is a huge amount of uncertainty. Still, day one there was, 6 months in, now I'm 2.5 years in, there's still a lot. And it's nerve-wracking. Like, is this going to work out? Whatever, all of it. Am I going to get this account? Am I going to be able to get this done? Is this going to be received well? So that has been very challenging, and I did not expect that. The uncertainty and being able to just accept the journey. Like whether this works out or not, I'm having fun and I'm glad I did it and I'm learning a lot. It's like that whole kind of repositioning and living with that was a big lesson for me. The other thing, when you ask the question that I used to think differently, I used to think when it came to starting a company, you just have to have a good idea. Just have a good idea and then you can have a company. It's actually like part of it is your idea and almost all of it is just nitty gritty day-to-day work, just work, not even sexy stuff, like just like the nitty gritty. Because the reality is my idea that I had for Vitaminis is different now because I'm always learning. I'm
Sure.
adjusting. I've adjusted
Sure.
the formula. I've adjusted the packaging. I've adjusted my sales channels, which we talked about. So yeah, you need a good idea, but do you really? I mean, there are so many stories about entrepreneurs that had one idea and pivoted to something completely different.
Absolutely.
So it's like 5% idea and like 95% just coming back, learning from what goes well and what goes poorly, continuing to evolve and not giving up.
Yeah, I was mentioning to you, I had another interview this morning and we were talking and ended up with a very successful exit. And he was talking about his first failure and how he looking back now, it was his ego. He was so right in his mind about the way this thing had to be.
Mm,
And it was a technical product. So he was convinced it had to be this way and he was like anal about the way it operated, and they launched it and nobody liked it because he didn't ask anybody and he didn't
mm.
iterate. And so he's like, that's a really tough and expensive lesson to learn as an entrepreneur. And I don't think in the food industry you can even do that. You can't really launch a food product without focus groups and having people taste it, like, because like, I mean, I guess you could, but like the big food companies, as I know, I read, I think it was Fat Sugar Salt. They talk about like even like
Well, the big
Lunchables.
companies wouldn't. Yeah, the big
Oh
companies.
yeah, but yeah, like small companies are like, oh, this is what people want, but then they taste it and they're like, this isn't good. Like,
Yeah.
and
But
like
even in that
just
example of that guy you're talking about, some people might have called it quits at that point. Okay, I tried it.
yeah,
It didn't work out.
yeah,
I'm done.
yeah.
But just the ability to kind of come back and iterate and try again is actually what made him successful because the alternative would have been just stop.
Yeah, well, Leslie, what he did, and it sounds like it's probably what you're doing as well with your sales channels, is what he actually did is he pivoted completely in his next business. He went door knocking at WeWorks, and it's a swag like t-shirt company. Went door knocking at WeWorks, actually sat in a room and said, "Hey, could you just give me some feedback on the quality of this t-shirt? What do you think about this design? Hey, would you order from this website?"
Hmm.
And people go, yes, no, maybe so. And you take and he's iterating and iterating and iterating until you have something beautiful. Like what I'm guessing you've done is like, hey, taste this for me, like, honey, my husband. But also, you don't want to just because your husband's biased, of
Yeah.
course,
Yeah.
and he's either, but like, hey, like I said, have your kids try it, have your kids' friends try it. Like, what do you think of this? What does it taste like? And being able to iterate and do that to go like, oh, this is the thing. To have
Totally.
a taste, because yeah, no matter. I mean, I think this is one thing that's pretty much proven in the food market. I think you could create something that arguably could be the healthiest thing ever created. If it doesn't taste good, that most people aren't gonna
Yes,
do
and
it.
that is something I did learn from my time in alcohol and beverages that applied
Yeah,
is we called it liquid to lips. Like taste is
yeah,
king. Like it has to taste good. And then people have to kind of believe that it's giving them the value. So if you can kind of get it to taste good and it delivers that value, they think it's worth it. That's it. Then you're good.
yeah. And then also depending on the type of products, like the mouth feel of it. Like, what does it feel like when
Oh
it's
yeah.
like the sensation of it is it's fascinating. Well, Leslie, as we wrap up here, let's talk a little bit about what's next for you and for the company, what you all are up to, and then, of course, where can we find, obviously, you said the website, but you said you're in retail now. So let's talk about what are the different places that people can go and consume and delight themselves with Vitaminis.
Yeah, well, my favorite place is our website, vitaminisbrand.com. I love to have that direct relationship with consumers that
And
are
a higher profit margin. Let's be very
yeah,
clear. That's also nice.
well, yeah, with shipping, you
Of
never know.
course. Yeah.
But yeah, because then you can get on our email list. We send great emails every week with recipes, educational content about your gut and different vitamins and what they do for you. So that's the best place. Drop your email, I'll send you a coupon. But aside
Cool.
from that, we are on Amazon and we just launched on Walmart Marketplace online. So
Nice.
those are kind of
Yeah.
like if you're a Walmart Marketplace shopper or an Amazon shopper, it's easy. And I
Sure.
get that. Like I use Amazon a lot. So if that's easier for you,
Yes.
great. You get subscribe and save, whatever. And then in brick and mortar, we are in 2 chains in the Midwest, Fresh Time, Farmers Market, and the Fruitful Yield. So that's about 80 locations in Chicago area in
Nice.
the Midwest. where you can find us in the vitamin section.
Very cool. Not to get into the too many details, is obviously a private company, but I'm more interested in your opinion on how have you felt about your channels now that you've gone into retail in terms of like the percentages, and have you had any surprises there, or like has it been? I'm just curious, like how you feel
Yeah.
about that as the owner.
Well, I think on the retail side of things, I don't think I realized there's a lot of almost mandatory spend built into it. So you've got your distributor, and then the distributor also wants you to promote through them, like, hey, buy a table at our show and pay to advertise on the distributor website. Then you've got the retailer. They have a lot of baked in promotions. Okay, we've got 4 sales a year. We require you to fund this % discount. I didn't realize that. I thought it was more autonomous. Like, okay, I'd like to put my product on sale, or I'd like to advertise, but it really is built in, like you're almost required. So that informed my pricing to some extent. I actually ended up raising my price because I knew that just would build some buffer for discounts that are going to happen anyway.
Sure.
So the
Yeah.
consumer is going to get it at that price anyway, but then it allows me to kind of appease everybody along the path.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a complex industry.
Yeah, and some of it you just kind of don't know until you get into it. Like we said, you can read it 1,000 times, but until you get into it.
Like, here's how you do business with Amazon, and then Amazon or Walmart decides that week to change their policy around something. You're like, oh, that's all out the door. Now I've got a new thing. I have friends who work at Walmart and Amazon in the e-commerce space, so I understand they're always changing policies around and such as sellers, and there's obviously they're always trying to tweak their business model too, just like you're tweaking yours. Well, Leslie, I want to thank you for coming on, sharing with us all these things. Thank you for putting out a product that makes a difference in the world to keep us healthier.
Thanks.
I think it's so easy to not. And we're just, and I think you're just a really good example of someone who saw something that they wanted for their family, which just one more time, go back to Shark Tank. So many of the products on Shark Tank are because they're like, oh, well, my family wanted this. I saw this would be valuable for my family. Then you're like, oh, wait, there's a business here. And next thing you know, maybe we'll see you on Shark Tank. Who knows? Or maybe we'll see you on, maybe we'll see you somewhere else, or whatever's next for Vitaminis. I really appreciate your time today. Thanks so much for coming on, and best wishes to you and the family.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Leslie.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frizzell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and give us a shout out, or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're cool people too.